Soaring today. They are up about 19.5% right now. We're up 51% in a week. Michael, I'm going to first turn to you to put this stock move into context, because this was one of the ones sometimes we talk about as emblematic of the frothy blow-off.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's gotten this traction. Tell me what you think is going on from a market perspective.
Well, it's revived. I mean, obviously it had this tremendous surge up into the, 60s. It had come far back down in the sort of reckoning on all the concept stocks, and now it's bouncing. What's most interesting to me, though, if you go back, it's less than 2 years ago that the initial merger that created Virgin Galactic with the SPAC was announced, not consummated, but announced. In the initial excitement after that, it went up to like $12 a share and then kind of receded and then got rekindled. But at that time, 2 years ago, they were projecting that for this year, 2021, they would have $200 million in revenue. They thought they'd be that far ahead of the game. So now we're double that price, and we're just doing test flights.
Wow. Okay, fair point, Morgan, which does remind me a lot of the Tesla story, although obviously they've gotten past that now. How significant is this weekend's news?
It's significant because, and keep in mind, and Mike just pointed to this, but this is a company that is still pre-revenue. This is the first of 4 test flights that need to happen before you can actually see that commercial service launch, and thus the ticket sales open back up and that revenue start up again in a meaningful way for the company. So the fact that this was successful, keep in mind they first tried to do this and had to abort that trip back in December, so it was delayed. It's been a long time coming, is very notable. It also, according to Cole Glazier, keeps the company now on track to do those 3 test flights. If all goes according to plan, as of right now, by the end of fall, then you see some upgrades, then you see that launch of service early 2022.
You know, I know we should move along here, but can we talk aliens for a quick second, Morgan? Because
this is like my favorite story that
every time
haven't talked about.
So every time I'm on Twitter now, especially over the weekend, I read things like this. My mom in Tennessee says the sky is filled with 50, and people are tweeting at Elon Musk saying, are these your satellites? And we're talking about all this space flight, and I'm thinking, is this all connected, or are we just going through like a strange, mental moment as a country?
No, I think we're ushering in this new commercially driven era of not only space flight and space travel and now space tourism when we're talking about Virgin Galactic, or, by the way, its competitor Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' company, is auctioning off a seat for millions of dollars right now. But also just in terms of satellites and what that's going to mean for connectivity, hence Elon Musk, SpaceX, and those Starlink constellations that people keep spotting in the night sky. But the UFO piece of this is actually really fascinating. This is the Department of Defense. It's our national security agencies. Congress actually tasked our national security entities with delivering an unclassified report by next month on unidentified aerial phenomenon. This is a very serious, real
is it just
topic
coincidental?
that's being investigated.
But is this happening because of all the satellites that are in the sky now and all this?
It has nothing to do with it. This is something different. This dates back. This is Air Force and Navy pilots who have been seeing things that they can't identify for quite a number of years. There's videos. Some of those have been released in the last couple of years. And you have some heavy hitters, everybody from the former Senate Majority Leader, Harry Reid, to former CIA directors who are now coming out. It's like the floodgates have opened.
Okay,
They're coming out and talking about UFO possibilities.
All right, Deirdre, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Where do you go from
I don't know that I can follow that up. I'm just here to listen to the UFO space talk. I'll leave that to you guys.
I didn't realize.
I trust Morgan's expertise here.
I was hoping it was going to be like, no, it's just,
I just want to know, Deirdre, you might have a window. In Canada, are they also like wondering if we're being visited? Is this just an American thing?
Right.
You know what? I am not sure. I'll ask around. I'll do some polling for you to see if we're fascinated by this.
That suggests to me that it is not. That it is purely we're losing our collective minds. All right, we'll move along before I get all the tweets from the alien people. Beyond Meat is surging after getting a double upgrade at Alliance Bernstein to outperform from underperform. They're calling it a reopening play that should benefit from increasing consumer mobility and its relationship with McDonald's. The shares are on pace for their best day in 4 months, but still negative on the year. Beyond was super hot after going public in 2019, but it's struggled a little bit lately. Although, Michael, I still think its share price at $118 is incredibly impressive, given that we've seen a lot of people come on the scene and more or less implode in terms of the stock price. To me, they're really hanging in there.
No, it's true. And in fact, the analyst concedes that this still has a pretty stout valuation. I mean, we're talking about 13 times revenue. Keep in mind, talking about no cash flow yet. So this is still in the ramp-up phase. And yes, I think the stock is supported by general enthusiasm and market share gains for meat alternatives, which is not going away. The question is this the best and proper vehicle to exploit that opportunity?
Deirdre, what would you add?
Well, I would just say that once during the pandemic, I tried to buy something other than sort of just the Beyond Meat burgers. No one in my family ate it. So I don't know. They've got something going with the Beyond Meat burgers. But some of the other products, not so much. In terms of what they're saying, I know that high-profile restaurant partnerships have been a big source of sales for the company. But throughout the pandemic, shouldn't people have continued to buy this? So maybe it really is competition biting, not just Impossible Foods, but some of the big players, too, like Tyson. So maybe that's what it's coming down to. We'll see as the economy reopens and as people have barbecues, if they're going to be barbecuing Beyond Meat burgers and sausages.
That's a great point, Morgan. Real quick to you, as I'm checking the price of Oatly, this reminds me it's down about...
I was just going to go there.
There, please do. Down about 3.5% today.
Yeah, I mean, agritech, right? The plant-based food phenomenon. And I think sort of to that point, and, what we're hearing, and you're seeing it with this double upgrade with Beyond today, is the fact that it is a reopening play and that the restaurant channels do seem to be more lucrative, more profitable. But perhaps part of the reason is because maybe people are still a little nervous about how do you cook a Beyond Meat patty. I don't know. We haven't done much of it in our house, but I'd go out and I'd order it, potentially.
Yeah.
Oatly, on the other hand, it's like I crack it open, I put it in my coffee every morning.
See, I leave the oats for the oatmeal, and I leave the coffee or the milk for the coffee. All right, let's move along because we're just getting some more news on this right now. SoftBank CEO Masa Son is sounding an alarm on the Olympics and calling out officials for moving forward despite a deadly fourth COVID wave that's gripping Japan. Masa Son tweeted that more than 80% of people want the Olympics to be postponed or canceled. Who and on what authority is it being forced through? Most of Japan remains on lockdown as its vaccine efforts lag other developed nations, with just 4% of its population vaccinated, per Reuters. The Tokyo Games are slated to begin in less than 2 months, and the International Olympic Committee has stated they will absolutely go ahead despite any COVID restrictions. Let's see. U.S. State Department just now raising its travel advisory to do not travel amid COVID-19 for Japan and Sri Lanka. Mike, this is going to be a tricky one.
Absolutely. And interesting that it's coming from this direction where, people in Japan concerned about the vulnerability of the local population, as opposed to, people there wanting to host this huge marquee event and maybe being pressured by those outside to close it down. So it seemed like it's going to come down to the wire. They obviously are ramping up vaccine efforts from a very, very slow start, but unclear if that's going to change the debate.
Yeah, Deirdre, I'm trying to make sense of this advisory. I mean, the U.S. State Department raising its travel advisory to do not travel for Japan, what does that mean for the Olympics?
I think you have to wonder if the organizers go back with pressure, not just from the U.S., but as Mike said, from its own population, even corporations there. Some 70% of Japanese firms want the Olympics canceled or postponed. But, it comes down to one number here, $26 billion. This is the most expensive summer games ever. So it looks unlikely that they're going to cancel it. I guess the question perhaps, will they mandate vaccines for athletes and fans?
True, because Morgan, you could envision a scenario where they say, OK, we're raising it now, but we hope then this kind of adds to international pressure on Japan or maybe on the athletes of the Olympics to do whatever they can to make this as safe as possible, and then they can rescind it as the games open up.
Yeah, and I think to that point, the Olympic Committee has said that 80% of athletes and officials are set to be vaccinated ahead of these games, and that they're going to be preventing the athletes from being able to mingle, essentially, with the public and keep their sort of range of motion and where they can go very limited. So there do seem to be, for better or worse, certainly it's up for debate, but there do seem to be some protocols that are in place that the Olympics and the folks that are organizing it, are really pushing and stressing right now. But to your point, I mean, we're seeing quite a number of folks in Japan. CEO of Rakuten also called it a quote-unquote suicide mission. So you're seeing that public outcry.
This reminds me a little bit. I happen to be living in London when the Olympics were there in 2012, Mike, and there was fury locally in all the lead up to the games about how it was going to be a disaster and blah, 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 blah. Well, it went off beautifully. It showcased London and the UK at its best, and it became one of the public's favorite celebrations. And maybe this is part of the normal process we go through, but obviously with COVID on top of things.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good reminder that maybe the locals don't don't always love the idea of hosting. It seems like it's more nuisance than opportunity, and that might be coloring a little bit of the discussion.
Right, and hopefully they'll look back and maybe say it was an opportunity, maybe to remind everybody at a moment when they're looking to travel that Japan would be a place to go.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.